Hello again, everyone. This is Zombie Kids Rule, or I guess I might start calling myself Everything Snorlax Lover. But anyway, I am back with part 4 of the series of tutorials for explaining how I made the Sudoku game that I previously posted a demo of. If you have not watched the couple of demos that I have for the Sudoku puzzle, they were several months ago. And if you have not watched part 1, 2, and 3, you probably should do that because these definitely build on each other. And I can't, my memory is fairly short, so I don't remember exactly what I did in each part of the part one, part two, part three. But basically, up to this point, I went over the number of switches, the number of variables, the number of common events that were used to do this. I highlighted the switches. I highlighted the variables, basically how they're named, how they're grouped. I highlighted almost all of the common events now. I went through the 81 common events that you need because each one of these squares basically, if it's not a hint in the Sudoku puzzle, then it needs to be clickable by the player. So there's a common event that is linked to every single one of these squares. So that's 81 squares. So once you build one of the common events, you can basically copy and paste that common event and then just change the necessary content. Like you change the switch, for instance. You change it to the switch that's appropriate for this square instead of this square. You change the variables, so the each one of these squares has a variable assigned to it to store player input. So, you change the switches, you change the variables, you change little things like that. And then it's just you doing the same thing 81 times. I went through the puzzle switch event, which is what kicks the game off. And we didn't finish that because we're going to actually do that now in part 4, where we're going to cover the aspect of the player gets to choose their own hints in the puzzle instead of having the hints pre-chosen for the player when you have the puzzle 1, puzzle 2, or puzzle 3. So we went through the majority of that, and we're going to finish that out, and we're going to do this event, Player Chooses Hints, in this video. Went through the puzzle setup event, and went through the solve puzzle event, and pretty sure, if I remember correctly, those are complete. I'm definitely going to double check before the last video. There will probably be one more video after this. There'll be a part 5 and went through the common event for how to try to solve the puzzle, how to check for errors in the puzzle, and then what to do if there's an error versus if the puzzle is correctly solved. So this part 4, is going to be about the player choosing their hints, and then part 5 will be basically highlighting the reset test, or I should say the reset functionality where you can reset the puzzle, the timer, and the score and penalty or bonus functionality. So that will round it out and make sure that I didn't miss anything. So, I apologize that this is piecemeal, but with these 7 events doing different things at different times and many times running in parallel, I'm trying to break out the explanation in a way that makes sense. And if you are so inclined to try to recreate this, you'd probably be better off to just do it as the tutorial show. And then when you're finally done, you should have a complete cohesive game that should work the same way mine does. So anyway, this is a lot of attention to detail. Once you get I guess, the structure down, and you get the way it's all interacting, all the events are interacting with each other. It really is just a lot of copying, pasting, changing variables, changing switches, and just a lot of attention to detail. So, quickly throw my caveat out there, as I've done always. I am not an expert. I do not claim to be. I am simply making these videos to try to give back to the community. Typically for people who are still new, they're still learning, they're trying to, they're on their RPG Maker path of trying to learn how to do things that they want. And, I've never made basic tutorials, not really. What I've done is, I didn't start from the beginning because there's lots of tutorial series out there that do that and they do it well. That's how I learned a lot of stuff. What I've done is I've said, hey, I've built this. I haven't necessarily seen a tutorial specifically for this, so let me put it out there and see if it helps people. There are probably better ways to do this. There are probably more efficient ways to do this. This is just the way that I figured it out, and it works using 100% eventing, with the exception of two default plugins. And I've already highlighted those plugins, and I have another tutorial that focuses on those plugins. The text picture plugin and the button picture plugin comes default with MZ. You just have to add it to your project. And one of my other tutorials shows how to do that, how to add plugins. So again, there probably is a better way to do this, maybe with a lot more scripting, but I'm just barely learning JavaScript, so I'm learning to improve things all the time myself. There may be another way to do this with more plugins, but again, I haven't done a lot with plugins. So anyway, let's get kicked off again. I will just say it one last time. If you have not watched the demos, if you have not watched part 1, part 2, and part 3, you probably should, because that will give you a better context of where we currently are. I will also try very hard not to re-explain things I already explained in part 1 or part 2 or part 3. Sometimes I get so focused on something I kind of forget, oh, I've already explained that. And you really should watch the other ones. But regardless, here we go. So we're going to go back to this puzzle switch event. And I previously highlighted this beginning portion, and because we gave the player the choice of, what do you want to do? And so going here, they can choose puzzle 1, easy, puzzle 2, medium, puzzle 3, hard, and then there was the option choose my own hints. That's what we skipped over last time. So I'm going to go down to that portion of it because we already talked about if it's puzzle 1, if it's puzzle 2, if it's puzzle 3. We covered those. So now we get down to the choice, choose my own hints. So the player has selected that in the show choices. First thing it does is it uses the show text command to give the player some information about choosing your own hints, meaning that it could make the puzzle much harder. Okay, and then again, more text saying that a typical Sudoku puzzle has 25 hints. 17 is required to have a unique solution. But here's the great thing about this. Some people will say that for a classic Sudoku puzzle, there can only be one solution. Okay, well, that's fine. But if you made this game, in technically speaking, there can be multiple solutions as long as at the end, right? This is one of the things that the solution checks for, is all of the columns. Does each column have the numbers 1 through 9 with no repeats? Does each row have the numbers 1 through 9 without repeats? And does each group have the numbers 1 through 9 without repeats? If all of that is true, then it doesn't matter how many solutions there are for the Sudoku puzzle, because it'll still be the correct answer. So that's one of the cool things about this option is, yes, you can have dedicated puzzles, puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3. They have dedicated hints that are revealed, and there really should be only one solution to that puzzle. The numbers have to go where the numbers go. But with the choose my own hint option, we start off with numbers assigned to all of these squares. But once the player chooses where their hints are going to go, the rest of the non-selected squares, those are now open. They're free. You can put any number you want in there. And so in theory, when you select something like, say, the minimum of 14 clues, that would make it much harder. In theory, that could result in more than one way to solve this puzzle, and that's perfectly fine. So that's actually, I think that's actually kind of cool. So the first thing, couple text things to just tell the player how the warning the player about this choice. And in the puzzle setup, that gets turned on and runs in parallel. That's where it tells the player using show text the rules of Sudoku, right? In case the player doesn't know already. Now here, use this label hint choices. Why? Because at some point in time, well, it's not may, or else there wouldn't be a label here. We have to jump back to here to show your choices again. So it's one of those things where, like, for instance, where you see go back here, if they choose go back, we're going to basically jump back to this label and then show them their choices again, and they get to choose something different. So label, hint choices. Just remember with labels, whatever you put in the label has to be exactly the same when you use the jump to label command. So show choices. Here we are. We're giving the player the choice of 28 hints, 25 hints, 21 hints, 17 hints, 14 hints, and typical show choices command. So that will pre-populate in your event the when 28, when 25, when 21, all the way to when go back. So now this is going to be very, very similar under each of these number of hint options. So when 28, we're going to use the variable, we've already seen this, Sudoku hints total, and we're setting that to 28, okay, because we're going to track how many hints the player has desired and how many hints have they already made, right? How many choices have they made? So we're going to take that variable, 715 Sudoku hints total, and set it manually to 28. Then we have the text, show text, select a puzzle. So because, in the way I made this for experimenting purposes, they're still going to be solving puzzle 1, puzzle 2, or puzzle 3 as if they didn't select their own hints. They're the same puzzles to start with. So they have to show choices again. So you have your show choices, and then under when 28, you have another set of show choices. And what are your choices? Puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, or go back, right? Go back is going to start over again. So we've got our new show choices. This is all still under 28 hints. Now we have our new set of whens. When puzzle 1, when puzzle 2, when puzzle 3, when go back. So under when puzzle 1, we're going to turn this switch on. Sudoku puzzle 1 is being turned on. We've seen that in one of the previous tutorials, okay? Then we have show text to alert the player to what's happening. Puzzle 1 is now active, so we're communicating back to the player. We've seen this before in another spot. This is what's freezing. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not freezing the player in place. This is basically just having the character sprite turn to the left to face the puzzle. I mean, that's not really important, but that I just put that in there. Okay. And then we've seen this before. I've already highlighted this, where this is the script that you use to turn on or off a self switch in any map, on any map, in any event, and any self switch, A, B, C, or D. So this one, again, $game self switches dot set value. Make sure you pay attention to your capitals. And then, open parentheses, open brackets, 30 is the map, 4 is the event, right? So player chooses hints. And then A is the self switch that we want to turn on. True means on, false means off. So we've seen this before. And honestly, folks, like I said, copying and pasting, I may very well have copied and pasted this from someplace else, and stuck it in here and just make sure that it's in the correct spot. And that is, so this part right here, right? So this part to this part is if they choose puzzle 1 under 28 hints. Now, puzzle 2 is very, very similar. You could copy and paste this under puzzle 2, and you just have to change the switch. So you're turning on Sudoku puzzle 2 switch instead of Sudoku puzzle 1. This stays the same, except you're changing the text to 2 instead of 1. This stays the same, and this stays the same. So not too much to change there. Guess what? When puzzle 3, same thing. Copy and paste it. Change the switch to Sudoku puzzle 3. This stays the same, except you're updating this to 3. This is the same. This is the same. So once you write 1, copy and paste it, make a little bit of an update, and you're done. When go back, jump to label hint choices. So if they decide, no, I want to go back, they jump all the way back to here, and then they get to choose over again, right? Okay, so then when 25 hints, well, guess what? It's almost exact, it's pretty much exactly the same as the when 28. So you can take this all the way down to here. You can copy this, paste it into the when 25 section, and then just make your appropriate updates. What are the appropriate updates? Well, so first, this is the same as above. You're just changing the value to 25 instead of 28. This is the same. Pretty much all of this is essentially the same, because let's double check. When puzzle 1, yep, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same, that's the same. Okay, perfect. Don't have to change anything. Same thing with puzzle 2. If you copied and pasted it from the when 28 section, all the same. All the same. This is exactly the same. So the only thing that you had to change when you copied and pasted from above is this value of this variable. That was it. And surprise, surprise, folks, same thing for this section, when 21 hints. You copy and paste from above, change this variable to 21, because that's the number of hints. Everything else stays exactly the same. No changes required whatsoever. So do it right the first time, and you're just going to be able to copy and paste it with one update. Exact same thing for when 17. Change the variable to a value of 17. All of this stays exactly the same. No changes whatsoever. And same thing with 14. Okay, so change this variable to a 14. All of this is exactly the same as it was in the previous sections. So that's pretty easy. That's kind of cool. Once you do it for 28, all the rest of it is copied and pasted and just changing the variable that says how many hints they want. And then this is go back. This is going back to the first show choices where they're choosing their number of hints. And that's, once again, if they pick go back, it's going to jump to label choose again. Right now, this one was going to hint choices. Choose again. This is going all the way back to, actually, I said that wrong. It's not going, that wasn't from when they were choosing their number of hints. This is going all the way back to, do I want puzzle 1, puzzle 2, puzzle 3, or choose my own hints? So that's where that go back was going all the way back here to choose again, to start all that all over again. So we're going to go back down to where we were. Bum, bum, bum. Okay, so there's that one. And then we have the never mind, right? So the never mind was, you know what? I changed my mind. I actually don't want to be doing this. And this is, and actually I already highlighted this in the probably the first tutorial, I'm guessing, tutorial 1, because this is just doing the animation for the switch to return to this position, and then it's exiting the event processing. So it's, you know, it's like you changed your mind and you didn't want to play the game at all, and so it's like you didn't want to interact with the switch. And I already talked about this, and I talked about the second page, right? I already talked about when you decide to reset the game using that switch. And so that's the part that we didn't talk about for this puzzle switch event. Basically covering that, what happens when the player choose my own hints and how that's set up. That's pretty easy. That's an easy thing to replicate or to add. And I think I mentioned before that when I built this puzzle originally, I tested it first. I just made sure that I could get all of my boxes and all of my numbers and all of my input, right? I could let the player input for all 81 squares. That's the first thing I did. Then I started building okay, well, how do we launch a game, right? How do we actually make it where there's a game involved? And then I did just puzzle one, and I went through all my events as if there was only one puzzle. And then I added puzzle two and puzzle three, and then I added the, choose your own hints. So I just kept adding to this. And that's typically the way I do this now with my experiments. Is I'll build something. I'll say, but what about this? I want to add this. Okay, so now this we have to we're turning this event on, right? Because down here in when they choose whichever number of hints they choose, we're using this script to turn on self switch A in event 4. So what that's doing is it's activating this event. And so this event has 4 pages. The first page is a condition of self switch A. So when the map loads, right, when the map loads, when you load up the game, or if you had just suddenly appeared on this map, even though this is parallel, it's not going to start running because the self switch is not on. Okay, so from this event 3, we're turning on that self switch A, which makes this page start to run in parallel. It immediately starts doing what it needs to do. There's no image, so the player can't see this. It's below characters, so in theory, the player could walk on it, if they can reach it. So what is page 1 doing? Well, first thing it does is it turns on a switch. Sudoku hint selection is turned on because the events need to know that the player is choosing their own hints. All right, so we talked about this switch in the previous tutorials, and we already saw where it comes into play. So then what is it doing? Well, what it's going to do now is it's going to essentially assign appropriate values to all 81 variables for each puzzle. So the first conditional branch we have is if Sudoku puzzle 1 is on. And what is that? So when the player chose puzzle 1, it turned on that switch. So when this event starts to run in parallel, it says, okay, I'm going to turn on Sudoku hint selection. Then I'm going to check, is puzzle 1 on, or is puzzle 2 on, or is puzzle 3 on, right? Which puzzle did the player choose? It has to identify that. And then everything underneath this is just assigning a specific value to all 81 variables that line up with these squares. And this is why you have to make sure you keep it straight of which variable is assigned to which square, right? I mentioned this before. This is 1-1, 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, all the way up to 1-9. This is 2-1. Now over here would be 3-1, 4-1 through 4-9, 5, 6, 7-1 through 7-9. So you have to keep track. And essentially, I took the solution to puzzle 1 and I just manually assign the values to the applicable squares. Why am I doing that? Because When the player is choosing their own hints, what will happen is all of these squares in this entire puzzle will be white boxes. And behind the scenes, there is a designated value for each one of those. So when the player clicks on the box, it calls the common event. The common event identifies that the player is choosing their own hints, and then it reveals the appropriate value of that square in a purple text or purple color. And then it doesn't let you click that square again because it's now identified as a hint. Because it also turns on a switch saying this square is now a hint. The player cannot click on it again. All right. So to do that, you have to tell the event what is the correct number behind every single one of these squares. That's why we're initially doing this. And this is where I ran into that problem where I realized late in the game that when I was putting the little check mark down here where the player could solve the puzzle, I had that visible while they were making their selections for their hints. And of course, every single one of these squares has a value behind it, and there's no duplicates in the columns or the rows or the groups. So if the player clicked on the solve puzzle while they were making their hints, technically the puzzle is solved. You just can't see it. All of these would be white boxes that you could click the solution and it'd say, "Congratulations, you did it." So I had to fix that. I had to make it where the solution option didn't show until you were done selecting your hints. So that's what this is doing. And then all you have to do is copy and paste this entire thing. So copy this, right? Just copy that, paste it here, change this conditional branch to Sudoku Puzzle 2 instead of Sudoku Puzzle 1, and then update each one of these variables to the correct solution value, right? So you've already got all your command lines. You're just changing the values as appropriate. It's just attention to detail work. That's all it is. It's not hard. It's just busy work, if you will, to finish this out. And then you do the same thing with this one. You copy and paste from above here, change the conditional branch to Sudoku Puzzle 3 is on, and then you manually change each one of these variables to the value that is associated with the solution. Okay, that's what page 1 is doing. And then it turns its own self switch B on to advance the page. So page 1 is these are technically the solutions to puzzle 1, puzzle 2, and puzzle 3. That's what they are. And this is being done so that the player can choose their own hints, and those squares will be revealed as hints. And then once you get past that, this kind of goes away. It's no longer important. Okay. Um, Actually, I'm gonna have to check something on that now because I'm gonna have to check something on that because now I just thought of that might still cause a problem because once and we'll get to this. I'll tell you what my concern is now. The solution's here, right? The behind the scenes, the solution is here. It turns on its own self switch B, which advances the page. Okay, so now self switch B, this page is the highest page where the conditions are met, still below character, still running in parallel. So this starts running immediately. When we get to the part that's problematic, actually it's problematic immediately. So, interesting. I'm gonna have to now figure out how to fix this, and I'll have to highlight it in another video. Here's the problem. I'll just explain this now. First thing this does is sets movement route player to that repeat, so that freezes the character sprite in place. You can no longer move the sprite on the map around. It does a conditional branch check. If Sudoku hint selection is on, right? So, which it will be initially because the player's choosing their own hints. So if it's on, then we've got to check a math thing here. We're going to take control variable 717, Sudoku hints remaining. So that's the number of hints that are remaining. And to get that value, we're going to take variable 715 and we're going to subtract 716. Now we're like, wait a second, I don't remember what those are. Well, that's okay. We'll look at them in just a second. But to do this, I've already highlighted this before. You identify your variable that you want to save the math in, set it to, and use your script, and then inside that script, you're doing your math. And basically, you're taking variable 715 and you're subtracting variable 716 from it. And this is how you do the script. $game variables dot value. Make sure you pay attention to your capitals of variable 715, subtract, okay, etc., etc. Now, what is 715 and 716? Well, easy enough to find out. Go to control variables, go down here, go down to 715, and that's Sudoku hints total, Sudoku hints chosen. Okay, so we previously set the Sudoku hints total when they selected how many hints they wanted. So Sudoku hints remaining is going to be equal to the hint total minus the number of hints that you have chosen. Okay, the first time this runs, you haven't chosen any, so this is 0. And this is whatever value was set with the number of hints, 28, 25, 21. Okay, so that's the first time it runs. But this is going to loop through. So we have to have this here to keep checking this to see when it runs out. And then we have our plugin command. We've highlighted this before. The text that we're going to show is number of hints remaining to choose. /C in brackets 20 is changing the color of the text, and then /V 717, that's showing the value of 717. And then we use the show picture command, picture number 96, no image because that's what the plugin requires. Tell it exactly where to show that text, and basically it's showing it up in the top of the screen. And so that's what this is doing. If the hints are on, if the hints are still on, do your math. Right? Your hints remaining is equal to your total hints minus how many you've chosen, and then show that to the player. Keep it updated up here at the top of the screen. So that's the first part it's doing. Now, the next part it's doing is it's got to check if Sudoku hints chosen, so the number of choices we've made, is equal to Sudoku hints total. Okay? So if conditional branch, this variable is equal to this variable, then that's telling us you've chosen all the ones you're supposed to, right? If my Sudoku hints chosen is 28 and my total hints is 28, that means I've made all my choices. So now it's got to do something. It erases picture 96. That's the number of hints remaining. So it erases that, gets rid of it. Then it uses this script, again, to turn on the self switch in event 2 and self switch A. That's solve puzzle. Now, this is where we have just created our problem, okay? And I didn't notice it before, and I have to figure out how to fix it. Why is this a problem? Well, it's a problem because as soon as this gets turned on, event 2, self switch A, over here, as soon as that gets turned on, it's going to show how to play the game. That's cool. I want that to happen. I want it to show the game. It's also going to turn on event 7 and 6, the self switches A's, which is the timer. Okay, cool. Turns the timer on. Turns on the score. Turns on the penalty. Okay, that's fine. That everything's fine so far. Okay, turns on self switch B. Now this is where the problem is immediate. This page, which I already highlighted, puts that question mark down here on the screen that allows the player to solve the puzzle. If the player were to immediately, so they have all their hints, if they were to immediately click that question mark, even though they haven't made any selections on the puzzle, behind the scenes, all of these squares still have values to them. And they are, in fact, the values that will solve the puzzle correctly. So if the player made all their choices and then immediately clicked the solve puzzle option, it would tell them that they solved the puzzle correctly. And it will do that because even though it's showing the hints now as hints and all the other boxes as white boxes, as far as the event knows, as far as the game knows, all of those boxes still have values behind them because the player hasn't changed any of those values yet. So technically, it would be they would be it would reveal the puzzle. It would say that the puzzle was correct. Okay, um, something's bothering me about that because it shouldn't be a white box. But let's keep going on and see. So we're here. So we did page one. Now it gets to here. Um, oh no, it doesn't. Okay, I take that back. Yeah, I take that back. So, okay, this is not a problem. Okay, I apologize for confusing you. This is not a problem because I did account for this and I didn't see how I did it, but this is why that is not a problem. As soon as it turns that self switch A on in event 2, the and this starts running in parallel, right? The solve puzzle. The first thing it does is it shows how to play the game, right? And then it is going on to the making it where you can have the little question mark to solve the puzzle. But while that's happening, this continues to run. Okay, because both of these are running in parallel. That means they can run at the same time. And so this is where this gets fixed. And I forgot about this. This is only waiting 60 frames. It's basically waiting 1 second. Then it's going to go through a series of conditional branch checks. And essentially, what it's doing is you're going to have 81 of these conditional branch checks. And what it's doing is it's saying if S1-1 hint is off, right? Meaning that if the switch that says this is a hint, if that is turned off, so it's not a square that the player chose for a hint, it's going to set the variable that is associated with this square to 0. And 0 means that it's a white box. So basically what this event is doing while this event is starting to run and going to make it where that question mark appears to let the player solve the puzzle, this event is going through all 81 of these conditional branches super fast, and it's saying, "Hey, is the switch S1-1 hint for this square, is that on or off? If it's off, that means this is not a hint, and so I'm going to set the variable to that to 0. And I'm going to do the same thing for the next one, the S1-2 hint for this square. And then this one, S1-3 hint. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to do that 81 times. And it's going to do it super fast. So by the time it gets down all the way here, again, you're just going to copy and paste 80 times because you wrote it once and then you copy and then you paste it 80 times. All you're doing is changing this switch and changing this variable, and it's going to be 0. Once it gets down to the end of this, the puzzle now has a certain number of hints that you chose, and then all the other boxes have a value of 0. So if the player immediately click that little question mark when when it is enabled, there's going to be all errors, right? Because all of the boxes were set to 0 if they were not identified as a hint. So anyway, I apologize for going off track there. I was concerned that I knew the puzzle was working correctly, but I was like, how did I do it? How did I account for that? How did I fix that? This is exactly why this is doing what it does initially. Okay, so you know, if the hint is still on, it does the math, it updates the value, and then if your hints are equal to your total hints that you wanted, then it's going to erase that picture. It's going to trigger this solve puzzle event to start running in parallel, but it's also going to check all of those switches for each one of these squares to say, is this square a hint? If no, I'm going to set the variable to 0. If it is a hint, I'm going to basically leave it the way it is. It's going to have the value that the player that was assigned to it when the player clicked on it. So that's going to do that 81 times in total. So just copy and paste that, and then update the switch, update the variable, and the value of 0 stays the same. Okay. All right. Again, I apologize for being confused there for a minute. So once that is done, now the puzzle is not filled out anymore, right? It's all the players seeing is the hints that they chose. So then it's going to show um, a message of start puzzle. Why I inserted this at the last minute? Because I was having a hard time making it so that the timer and the penalty or bonus counter didn't start until the player was ready to actually begin. So I didn't want the timer to start while the player was choosing their hints, and I didn't want the timer to start while the player was reading about the rules. How do you play Sudoku? And remember, a lot of these events are running in parallel, so they're basically going at the same time doing things. And so I was experiencing some trouble with the timer starting before I wanted it to. My solution was this. Actually, there was a couple problems. I had the timer being triggered in a couple different spots, so I fixed that. But this is now making it where once the player has selected all of their hints, then there's a show choice pops up that is just start puzzle. That's all it says. It's right in the middle of the screen, start puzzle. And the player has to click on that in order for the other things to be triggered. Now, I will just show you something because this is interesting. Um, there is no field here. It's not. If I were to say OK, it's going to add something to this event. I don't want there to be a no thing here. You notice the default is none. There is no default selection. There is no cancel selection. It's disallowed. I just want one choice to be on the screen. So I'm going to click OK here. Now, there's only one choice. So show choices, start puzzle. When, start puzzle. There's no other choice. But yet when I edit this, it defaults to adding the no. Okay, I'm just warning you of that because if I click cancel, it should be fine. Yeah, it didn't add it. Okay, but if I go in here to edit anything and I don't remove this, or if I don't cancel this, it's going to add a no choice, and I don't want that. So anyway, I just wanted to highlight that because when I saw it, I thought that was a little bit weird. So I added this show choices start puzzle simply because I was trying to problem solve. I don't want the timer and the penalty counter to start before the player is fully ready. And then so when they click when start, what's it going to do? First thing it's going to do, it's going to turn off that switch for Sudoku hint selection. So because the player is no longer selecting hints, so it's going to turn that off. Next thing it's going to do, it's going to use that script to turn on self switch A in event 6. So true, it's triggering this. It's going to trigger the timer to start running. And then it's going to wait 10 frames, right? 1/6 of a second, basically. And then it's going to do this script to turn on self switch A of event 7. It's going to trigger this event to start running. And then it's going to turn its own self switch C on. So it's going to advance the page. Okay? But that's only going to happen. All of this is only going to happen if the number of hints is equal to the number of hints total that you selected. Okay? That's the only time this is going to run. So basically, the player has used up all their hints. So that means it has to advance the game. Okay? So we go back down here, and the player has used up all their hints. They have to click start, turns off the hints, the switch. It triggers event 6 to start running. It triggers event 7 to start running. And then it turns its own self switch C on to advance the page. Otherwise, meaning the player has not finished all their selections, it's going to go down and do this. Okay? And what is this doing? Well, it's checking every single hint switch. And the first conditional branch, this is just going to be 81 of these conditional branches that are exactly the same structurally, and you just have to update the variables and the switches. So if S1-1 hint, that's the switch for the hint, is on, that means this has been selected as a hint, then it's going to use the plugin command, the TextPicture text. It's going to show the value of that variable. So that's the solution, right, behind the scenes. It's going to, and it's changing the color, so it makes it purple, because hints are in purple. It uses the show picture, and this I already previously explained this. This square is picture 1, picture 2, picture 3, picture 4, picture 5, picture 6, right? You have to keep track of your pictures. There's 81 pictures just for the squares. You have to keep track of those. None, because that's what the plugin calls for. And these, we've seen these coordinates before in another, in the puzzle switch, right? So this is where you can copy and paste or otherwise keep track of your X and Y coordinates in another part, okay? So if the hint is on, then show me what that value is for the hint in that square. Else, otherwise, the hint is off, then it's just a white box. Picture 1 is a white box that will show up here. It's in the X and Y coordinates that are appropriate, which we already determined from this event over here. And we have to use the plugin command ButtonPicture to make that a clickable white box. And when we do that, as I previously highlighted, you have to tell it which picture, so picture 1, and you have to tell it which common event, right? Which common event am I supposed to run when the box gets clicked? This, if you do this the first time, you then just paste it, right? Copy this, paste it, and this is what I would do. I wouldn't paste this 80 times. Instead, what I would do is I would copy this, paste it here. Okay, so now this is pasted from here. I would update this. So I would update my switch, make this S1-2 hint, change this variable, change the picture, change the coordinate, change the picture in the else, change the coordinates, change the picture, change the event, right? And you have a reminder, because if you're doing this right one in a row, you can see that this is picture 1, so this is going to be picture 2. You can see that this is common event 141, this is going to be 142. You're doing it one at a time. And that's why I wouldn't copy and paste one of these 80 times, because I want to keep track of this to make it easier to update. So then what I would do is I would copy this and I would paste it immediately below. And then I would just update it. So when I got to this one, I would update the switch, update the variable, update the picture, the coordinate, the picture, the coordinate, the picture, the common event. Then I would copy this and paste it below. And I would just keep doing that over and over again until I got all 81 of them. Okay? And so now I'm just going to scroll down until we get all the way down here. We're up to 71. We're almost there. We're cruising. Okay, so here we go. Here's the last one. This is the last one that's needed. And it's exactly the same as the ones before. Update the switch. If S9-9 hint is on, then make sure you're using the variable for that square, the correct picture, the correct coordinates. In the else branch, the correct picture, the correct coordinates, the correct picture in the button picture, the correct event. And then what it's doing is it's waiting 10 frames before it starts at the top again, right? Because remember, parallel events run all the way through and then immediately start back at the top until it's told to do something else. So the first time through, right? Let's say the player picks 14 hints. The first time this page runs, it's going to freeze the player. It's going to do this quick check and say, hey, how many hints do I have remaining? I'm going to make sure that's showing at the top of the screen. Then it's going to check and say, hey, are my total hints, the hints that I've chosen, are they equal to the total? If the answer is no, it's going to skip all of this, and it's going to drop all the way down to this portion. And it's going to check all of these to see which hint, right, is on, which hints are on, which hints are off. And once it checks all those, it's going to go right back to the top and do it all over again. And while this is going through, while this is running, basically looping through, while this is running behind the scenes, the player is picking squares, common events are being called, they're inputting a value, and then when they're done with that, it gets picked up by this event. Because now whatever they picked is going to be updated, right? I'm sorry. No, that's not true. I take that back. That's a different page. What's happening is this is running through, checking this. The player is clicking on a box, and then the common event is designating that square as a hint. And then that is being picked up by this. So it will be shown as a hint. And this just keeps going through, right? And the player keeps clicking, and the common events keep identifying those squares as hints, and it keeps being reflected that way in this event until the number of hints chosen equals the number of hints they wanted, and then it triggers this part, right? And as I said, it kicks off solve puzzle, but it also sets all of the non-hints. It sets all of those variables to 0. And then once those are set to 0, it does that final portion. They have to click the start puzzle, and then it kicks off the timer, and it kicks off the score penalty. And then it turns its own self-switch C on. Okay, so now the player has chosen all their hints. This has run. Self-switch C is turned on, which means it makes this page active. Okay, stop it. Okay, here we go. It makes this page active. Self-switch is C. This page is now the highest page where the conditions are met. You notice it's still below characters. It is still running in parallel. That means this page immediately starts running and doing its job. And what is it doing? Well, it's actually very similar to this page. It's very similar to this. Okay, you notice that if the hint is on, it's showing it. Else, it's showing the white box with the clickable, right? So this, when we go to this page, it's very, very similar. So what does it do? The part that we just saw is essentially this part, right? Wait a second, let's see. If the hint is on, then do this. If the hint is on, do this. And then what this little part here was inserted because this is the part that means the player has already picked that square and entered a value. Okay, so this is basically the same as this, but with this piece inserted. This part right here has been inserted. Okay, and there are two else's. So if we look at this again, because once we do it once, we're just going to copy and then paste this 80 times and then update it appropriately. So first thing the conditional branch is doing, if S1-1 hint is on, so we know that this square is a hint, then show the value of the variable 601 and do your show picture to make it show here. Else, meaning that the hint is not on, then it has to check for the this part. And it says if Sudoku 1-1 switches on, that's the one that says, did the player already give this a value? Did they already click on it and input a value? If that switches on, then display the value of 601 in that square and use your show picture to do it. But still make it clickable. It still has to be clickable because, like I described, I think in the part one when I was talking about the puzzle switch, or I don't know which part it was, doesn't matter. When I was talking about the puzzle switch event running, then or maybe puzzle setup, I don't remember which one, but it doesn't matter. The player still has to be able to change their mind. So even if the player already input a number here, and so the hint is is not a hint, it's the player, the switch is on saying that the player input a value. The player has to be able to change that if they want to, and that's what this is providing for. So if the Sudoku 1-1 switch is on, player already chose this box, show the value, but also make that number still clickable. So picture 1, common event 141, in case the player wants to change their mind. Because if they click on it again, it'll trigger the common event again, and it'll let them input a new number. Else, so underneath this, else, right, we know that because it highlights when we click on this. We also know it because we can edit it, see that there's an else branch. Else, show a white box in this square, right? So show the white box and make it clickable. Make picture 1 call common event 141 when you click on it. That's what this is doing. Okay, so it's going to check first, is this square a hint? If so, show the hint. Otherwise, else, has the player already picked it? Has the player already put a number in? If so, show the number that the player input and make it clickable so they can change it. Else, meaning that the player did not previously input a value, show the white box. So the player has never clicked on this. And the other thing that's happened behind the scenes that I highlighted in a previous video is the common events that are being called here. If the player ends up clicking on a box and then ends up entering a value of 0, so they don't pick a number 1 through 9, they pick 0, then that sets the variable to 0, and it actually and then it turns off this switch that the player has input a value, and therefore it will show up as a white box again. So if I'm the player and I click here and I enter a value of 7, and then I click on it again and I enter a value of 0, this will go back to being a white box. It won't show 0, it'll show a white box. That is what this is doing. And then you copy this, you paste it here, and then what would you do? You'd update this switch, you'd update this variable, update the picture, update the coordinates, update the switch, variable, picture, coordinates, picture, common event. Picture, variable, picture, common event. You update those, copy, paste, and then just do the same updates. And you have to do that 80 times. So as long as you get the first one right and it's correct, you can copy and paste, one after the other, and just update them as you go through. This is just attention to detail. I don't want to say it's busy work because it's needed, but it's just attention to detail stuff. And you do that for all 81 squares. So let's just go down quickly because we just got done doing that. All right, so we're up to 8. Where are we? 9-7, 9-9. So this is the last one. Okay, and sorry, it's this one. There we go. So it looked weird for a second. So here's 9-9, exactly the same as all the previous ones, right? And you just have to do the appropriate updates. And then once that one's done, it waits 10 frames, and then it goes back and it does all the checks again. Why? Because this is essentially the page that is running to allow the player to keep making changes in the puzzle until they select the solve puzzle option. So this just keeps running, and it's allowing the player to interact with the game. Okay? Now you notice, maybe you didn't notice, but nowhere in this event does it turn on a self switch to move to this page. Why? Because that's actually done by another event that's running in parallel. We already saw it. Okay? So that is the end of this page that's running. And it's just going to keep running until the player tries to solve the puzzle. Now, let's look at page 4. Page 4 is just that page where there's no contents. Self-switch D is the condition. Action button. So it's no longer running in parallel. It's no longer doing anything. So when the player goes to solve the puzzle, if they did it correctly, then this switch is going to get turned on so that this page stops running. This isn't doing anything anymore, right? It's advancing it to here. Okay. All right. And I think that is pretty much it for the player chooses their own choices. So yeah. Okay. So we went back and we talked about allowing the player to do their own choices, and we showed how to do it. And we basically said that everything in this section here is, whoops, oh no. Yeah, everything in this section here is basically a copy and paste to the next section down, and you just have to change the value of this variable. So we went through all of that, and and we showed where it's triggering this event to run, right? Event 4, self switch A. And then when we went through this, we highlighted the fact that this first page, all it's doing is it's saying which puzzle did you pick, and it's basically assigning the solution values to all the 81 variables. And it's doing that so that when it turns its self switch B on, when it goes to this page can run and run and run, and it allows the player to make their hint choices. Player clicks on a thing, it basically calls the common event, identifies it as a hint, and then it starts showing up on the puzzle as a hint. And this is just basically tracking. Have you made all your hint selections? If no, well, then you can keep clicking. If yes, then we're going to turn on the solve puzzle, get that running, and we're going to set all of the other variables that aren't hints to 0, and then we're going to advance. Here we go. We're going to make them click start, and then we're going to trigger the timer and the score events to start running. And then we're going to click self-switch C, which takes us to this page. And this is the page that just keeps running and running and running and running and running to let the player choose all of their white squares and give them a value, right? And this will just keep doing that until the player either does the solve puzzle, or in theory, they could click the reset button, because there's a reset button down here that's being controlled by this event, and that lets them basically give up and start over again. Okay? And that's pretty much it. And this gets triggered by another event later on. So again, once again, lots of copying, lots of pasting, and then just attention to detail as you update the switches and the variable numbers and the coordinates and the pictures, right? The picture numbers. You got to pay real close attention to that, because one simple mistake that you don't catch is going to throw it off. And number one, it might be hard to find, because in order to test this, you have to click on every single square. You have to basically solve the puzzle to make sure that it's working correctly. And if you make one little mistake, you would technically have to test this fully. You would have to click on every single square, declaring them to be a hint, and make sure that the hint feature works for every single square. And then you would have to solve the puzzle, completely, to make sure that all of the squares, all of the tiles are functioning the way they're supposed to. So one little tiny mistake, can be hard to find because it requires a lot of play testing. But it also, once you make the mistake, you got to then find it in the event to figure out what did you do wrong, and which one of these events is controlling that. So it really behooves you to pay very, very, very close attention and to double check your work as you go. Each time you copy and paste something, double check to make sure, did I change all the variables? Okay. Or did I change all the values I needed to? Okay, cool. Let me copy and paste that and do it again and do it again. All right, so that's the end of this video. So again, I apologize for how long these are, and I apologize for kind of being confused there for a minute, but I did get back on track. I'm not going to redo this. I don't know how to edit videos, folks. I'm sorry. I'm old. I'm not fancy. I'm not going to try to edit that out. People will just have to deal with it. And if they don't like it, then I guess these videos aren't valuable to them, I guess. I don't know. But I apologize for how long these are. I hope this is helping someone. I hope I hope people can learn from this, even if they don't recreate the Sudoku puzzle. If they can learn something from it that they can use on something else they want to do, that makes it all worthwhile. If you do find these helpful, or if you just at least appreciate the effort that goes into them, please consider liking, subscribing, getting notifications, leaving comments. You can also find me on rpgmakerweb.com in the forums. My username is the same as it is here, Zombie Kids Rule. You can always instant message me over there, or PM me, or whatever they call it. So if you wanted to communicate that way, you can. I'm happy to answer questions, take suggestions, take requests. If you have a request for something, and if I can actually do it, then I'm happy to try and help out. So there's only going to be one more part to this, so that'll wrap up the series finally. I'll try to finish that today because I have other things I want to work on, but try to finish up the series. In the meantime, folks, I hope you're having an awesome day. I hope you're having a great time learning RPG Maker. I hope you're having a great time working on your projects. I find this incredibly fun. When it stops being fun, I'll probably stop doing it. But in the meantime, until I can get another video up, happy gaming, happy game developing, and I will talk to everyone later. Bye.